Okay, so today we're going with Chapter 4, Rights and Responsibilities. And today we're really looking and focusing on the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution was written in 1787, and the Bill of Rights was added in 1789. It was part of the agreement for ratifying the Constitution that this Bill of Rights would be added in order to add more meaning to what individual rights citizens were guaranteed. And so the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments. And it really deals with a lot of people's personal freedoms. So we're going to look at the first 10 amendments today. The First Amendment has actually 5 parts, so it encompasses a lot of stuff. The 5 parts. The first one is the freedom of religion, that you have the right as an American citizen to practice any religion you want, as well as no religion. You don't have to practice religion. Because of this part of the amendment, there's no national religion. We're not allowed to have a national religion and say everybody has to be Zoroastrianism or everybody has to be Jewish. That's not how it works. But part of this First Amendment, or the freedom of religion, is separation of church and state, that there is a division between religious life and government and politics, that they shouldn't, the church shouldn't influence the government, because not everybody believes in the same church. Otherwise you'd have like 50 different churches influencing government. And so there is this division between the government and the religious bodies. The second part is freedom of speech. And freedom of speech just basically means that you have the right to listen to and express ideas and opinions through your speech. There are some restrictions, however. It's not without its own limitations. For example, if it could lead to the injury of people, if it injures others, then you're prohibited. You can't do it. For example, slander. Slander is where you knowingly say something false about somebody else or something that could hurt somebody else's reputation. So, for example, if I were to go on Twitter and talk about or say something to the effect of this person is lying and cheating and doing this, and it hurts their reputation, maybe they lose their job because of it, then that would be slander, because I'm knowingly saying that it's wrong, or knowingly saying something that I know is wrong. So that would be an example. Another good example would be if it causes physical harm, like if you're in a crowded room and you all of a sudden just yell fire, and there's no fire, but people get trampled because they're going out the door and they get injured or they get killed, you are going to be charged. You will be charged with that because you put people in harm's way, knowingly put people in harm's way. You knowingly said something that was false. So the third part of it is freedom of the press, and freedom of the press kind of works along the same lines as freedom of speech, that you're able to express your ideas through writing. And again, there's restrictions. For example, libel. Libel is where you are knowingly writing something that could damage a person's reputation. A great example of this would be when you're in the checkout lines at like Walmart or the grocery store, and you come across like the Globe or the National Enquirer, those magazines and those newspapers that are there, and they're talking about this person's on drugs, or this person's cheating, or this person's dying, or all kinds of stuff. Some of that can damage their reputation, that they could lose money, they could lose endorsements, and those kinds of things. And so a lot of those stars, those people who are in the spotlight, they actually sue the National Enquirer and those organizations because of the libel that takes place. Now, freedom of the press, those restrictions apply to electronic media, so like Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff, as well as TV and radio. The next part of it is freedom of assembly, and freedom of assembly just means that you have the freedom to hold meetings without being restricted. However, those meetings need to be peaceful. So even if you hold a meeting that's speaking out against the government, as long as it's peaceful, you can have it. But as soon as it turns violent, where you start attacking people or setting fire to buildings or those kinds of things, then it's going to start getting restricted. The last part is the freedom of petition. And a petition is a formal request. And so a petition the freedom of petition gives you the right to ask the government to do something or to stop doing something. So you could be petitioning them to repeal the tax, or repealing or to add a new law that protects the environment or something along that line. So that's the First Amendment. Lots of stuff in there. Excuse me. The Second Amendment deals with militias, and we kind of talked about it in the last video about how interpretation deals with that. But remember, it deals with militia, and a militia is a volunteer army. And each state has their own militia, a volunteer army that can be called up. And we interpret it to mean the right to bear arms, the right to carry weapons. The Third Amendment is talking about quartering of soldiers or housing soldiers in your own home during peacetime, that it's not allowed. And that came directly from the Revolutionary War, because in the Revolutionary War, the British were forcing soldiers or forcing people to take soldiers into their homes to house them. And the soldiers just wrecked the places. They destroyed them completely, and people never saw any money for it or anything. So that was directly from that. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. So if you're ever under suspicion of something, they have to have reason to come in. And so that's why they have to have a search warrant. And a search warrant is a legal document that describes the place that's going to be searched and the people or the things that are going to be seized, that are going to be taken. It's issued only if there is good reason to believe that evidence is going to be found. A judge isn't going to sign a search warrant unless the cops have good reason to believe that there's stuff there. So it can't just be because they don't like the way you look. The Fifth Amendment deals with a lot of the rights of the accused. For example, it talks about being indicted, and that's formally accused of a crime. And you have to be formally accused by a grand jury. And a grand jury just decides if there's enough evidence for a trial. They don't actually watch the trial. They're not a petit jury. Excuse me. A petit jury is the one who makes the decision of guilty or innocent. A grand jury just decides, yeah, they probably should go to trial and figure this out. It also talks about the right to not testify against yourself, that you don't have to self-incriminate yourself, that you don't ever have to say, yes, I did it. It's the state's job to prove that you did it. Another thing in the Fifth Amendment is double jeopardy, and double jeopardy just means that you cannot be convicted for the same crime twice. So you could go to trial many times, but you can't be convicted. They can't come up with a verdict that you're innocent or guilty and then retry you. So the only way they're able to retry you is if they have like a hung jury where no decision was made. The Fifth Amendment also talks about due process of law, that you can only be punished after receiving a trial, that the punishment should not come before the trial. And so due process just means that things have to happen in a certain order. The Fifth Amendment also talks about the right to own property, that you have the right to your property and the state can't take it away from you except in certain occasions. A good example given is eminent domain. And eminent domain means that the government has the power to take your private property if it's for a public cause. So most people don't really encounter this all that often, but a great example would be like on TV shows where you see there's this huge cop chase. The cops are chasing this criminal, and one of them wrecks their car, so they pull out their badge and they're like, I need to use your car. And so the private person has to give up their private property to the state because it's for public use. The cops are using it. Excuse me. The Sixth and the Seventh Amendments kind of deal with the same stuff about juries. The Sixth Amendment talks about your right to have a lawyer. It talks about the right to have a public trial and your right to have a speedy trial. The Seventh talks about your right to have a trial by jury and a jury of your peers. The Eighth Amendment talks about bail and punishment, that no excessive bail should be given. And bail is the money or property that the accused has to give the court as a guarantee that they're going to show up for their trial. So you can't be charged too much for bail. It also talks about cruel and unusual punishment, and what that means exactly is hugely debated throughout American history on what is cruel, what's unusual. It's still debated today. The Ninth Amendment talks about people's rights that are not specifically listed in the Constitution, like your right to live and travel anywhere, your right to have whatever job you want, your right to get married to and have a family, your right to have a free education, your right to join groups, so to join a political party or to join an activist group. The 10th Amendment reserves powers for the states or for the people. And this is where we get the reserved powers that we talked about in the last video. And so anything that's not given to the federal government, but not specifically denied to the states, is given to the states. So anything that is not given to the federal government, but is not specifically told to the states that you can't do this, that's a power of the states. So it actually gives the states quite a bit of power. So the next video we'll look at some of the other amendments.